We click the VO2 metabolic testing, enter the subject's information, then we click OK. Say dilution mode, please turn on dilution pump before placing the hood to the subject. So we get the canopy, put it on the subject. Actually, we turn on the dilution pump, put the canopy on the subject, and connect the tube to the canopy to pour the air out. We cover the canopy with the top part of the canopy still stay on top of the pillow. Wrap the drape around the pillow so it's airtight. And on the shoulder part, we have to tuck it in. Make sure there's no leakage on the shoulder part. Again, tuck in. Make sure there's no leakage. So it's important that we don't have a leakage on the top and on the shoulder part. So here we press bar to continue, the space bar to continue, and we are going to sample the baseline. Now we are in the ready to start testing window. Here, the flow rate for most people should be 15 to 30. And we want the FeCO2 between 1.0 to 1.2%. So this CO2 should be lower, should be much higher by reducing the flow rate. So we are going to adjust the flow rate to 30 to start with. And there's a delay time. We need to wait for 30 seconds to get a good reading of the CO2 concentration diluted. So CO2 concentration has increased from 0.5 right now to 0.7, and I expected it to increase to 1.0 to 1.2%. So this time is 0.8. And the 0.87. Because the subject weighs only 124 pounds, chances are that we need to have a lower flow rate than 30 liters per minute to get him to 1.0 to 1.2%. So I will go ahead and adjust the flow rate to 20, which is this variable. Again, the CO2 concentration should move up higher slowly. we wanted the diluted CO2 concentration to be between 1.0 to 1.2% because we calibrate the system's CO2 analyzer at 1%. So right now CO2 is 1.11%, 1.12%. So we have reached our goal to start the metabolic testing. And I will press spacebar. Usually, the canopy measurement, we perform that early in the morning. The subject should fast for 8 hours, not eating anything except water. And the subject, if they come in the morning, they should rest for at least 20 minutes. The better way would be that they stay overnight in a clinical research center setting, and in the morning move the metabolic cart close to their bed and measure the resting metabolic rate. The resting metabolic rate can change a lot within a day. The most obvious is after every meal they have the higher value due to the digestion. So the way it is early in the morning has the lowest one, commonly between 0.7 to 1.0 max. Before lunch, after breakfast it gets higher. Before lunch gets slightly lower than after breakfast, and then after lunch get higher. Before dinner slightly lower, and after dinner get the highest reading in the metabolic testing. So the subject now has a 1.1 mass, RQ 0.88. That means burning slightly more carbohydrate than fat. And resting energy expenditure 1581. And the common way of doing the canopy testing is to have the subject test 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes longer. Throw away the first 5 minutes or 5 to 10 minutes data. Only use the later part of the data. Also check how fast, how much the VO2 or the resting energy expenditure REE is changing. We should have an environment that's not too bright, but not totally dark either. Has its own area so that it's away from disruption, and should not watch the movies. Also, the subject should not laugh, should not move the leg. And this is a very sensitive measurement. So again, we see the VO2 was low, get a little bit high, and now come down. The RQ actually hovered about 0.9. It was 0.94, dropped down to 0.88. Right now stay around 0.9. In this case, the subject had just taken some snacks. So that might have affected the measurement slightly. If you plan to throw away the data of the first 5 minutes, then when it gets to 5 minutes, you get one more chance to adjust. Like the CO2, we can see it's a 1.2%. So we can increase the flow rate slightly so that the CO2 will be centered around 1.0. So in this case, I will give it about 20% or more air, and the increase of flow from 22 to 25 or 26. Expect the CO2 to be diluted around 1.0. And right now, I set the system to resample the baseline every 5 minutes so that we can correct for the drift of the analyzer. The whole room air recalibration process takes 30 seconds. And now CO2 is 1.08, 1.09, so our adjustment has some effect in diluting the CO2. But we want our subject to think of peaceful, be calm, not thinking things too exciting. For the demonstration, we will finish right now. But usually you should last a little bit longer. So here I will press the end test and confirm end test. Record added successfully. So we have the text report will be printed every minute. This is common for dilution method.